What's going on, Wolfpack Nation? Thank you all so much again for tuning back in here. As we got an exciting episode today where we're actually going to be reviewing the football season for the ACC. So breaking down each team, giving them a grade, but before though we kind of explain a little bit more, I want to go and welcome our guest Dan Siegel here from the ACC Content with Pipeline. Dan, hope you're doing well today.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on here. Excited about this little bit that we're doing. We are reviewing the season, and as far as the grades are concerned, only 2 teams actually failed, but a lot of C range. So
okay, yeah. So basically, so Dan kind of teased it there. So basically, for every team, we're going to give a grade, normal school grades, so like A pluses, C minuses, all that jazz, based on how we think that what kind of grade that we feel they should get. Now, this is kind of not necessarily set in terms of criteria for each, but again, we'll kind of dive a little bit more into it. But we're going to go alphabetically, do half teams in this part, and the second part we'll finish the rest. So with that being said, so we're going to start off in alphabetical order. So that means that we get to start with the one, the only Boston College. So Dan, since you're the guest, I'll let you go first. Tell us what grade you gave him for the season.
So I did consider the Phil Dracovic injury. I felt like it would be unfair to kind of grade them based on their preseason expectations and just going on the assumption he played 12 games, because he only played a couple games and he returned late in the season, didn't actually even play he didn't look healthy. But I'm giving them a C plus because even though their offense struggled, I think even though their offense struggled without Dracovic, we could give an excuse there, but their defense did not take the strides that I thought they would make. And that has nothing to do with your quarterback being injured. So I'm going C plus or BC.
Okay. And we'll go to Macon, then Michael, and then myself, and we'll just keep it in that order. So Macon.
Yeah, for me, I would say I was right about where Dan was talking. I have them as a B minus on the season. And honestly, C plus probably does sound a little bit better, more fitting, because I just felt like they were just an average team. They finished, I think it was 2-6 in conference, but that was also because they didn't have Dracovic. And I really think the game, honestly, not to kind of toot our own horn here, I do think the game that kind of took the wind out of their sails was the NC State game they had, because they were going into that game with about week 5 or 6. And they were like, man, people remember, they was kind of like, okay, whoever wins the Boston College NC State game is going to be like, okay, you're in the driver's seat to a degree going up against Wake Forest down the road, because we had just beaten Clemson. So when we embarrassed them, and that was probably the most complete game, other than maybe a game later in the season I can't think of right now, but that was, that was the first scoop and score we had. That was, and not trying to get into the game details, but I do think that game took the wind out of their sails. I think Dracovic came back and they tried their hardest to compete, and I just don't think it was up. So I feel like it was average. They were 6-6 overall, so they do get to go to a bowl game. Kind of is why it kind of bumps me maybe up from a C to a B minus, because they at least get to do that relative to their expectations. But I never saw them as like a 9-3 team or 8-4 team, so it's kind of like eh.
Yep. Maggle?
Yeah, I have them just at a solid C. It is hard to, judge them based on Dracovic going out. I mean, they ended up, like we said, 2-6, and it's just hard to say what they would have been with Dracovic the whole year.
Yeah, and then for me, I gave them a solid C as well. Looking at their schedule, their best win was against Missouri in overtime. But obviously their losses weren't the best either. But definitely going 2-6, especially with a season that had a lot of hype like Boston College did, for them to end up 2-6 in conference. Definitely disappointing for sure. So now heading on to, I think, which is an interesting one, is Clemson, who started off predicted 12-0 and 8-0 in the conference, and finishing 9-3 and 6-2. So Dan?
Yeah, so I talked about it on my podcast, right? And the expectation for Clemson, obviously, they're amidst a dynasty, so it's championship or bust for any year for them. And I think even after this year, that'll probably still remain the case. They have another 9-3 year, it probably changes. But I'm going to give them a C-, actually, only that good of a grade because I think things improved throughout the year outside of DJ, their quarterback, who at first they had all sorts of offensive issues. It was everywhere, their run game, their offensive line, their receivers, everything. And I think everybody improved except for DJ himself. So now with their elite defense, I think by week 12, week 13, they became just a quarterback away and they could grab someone in the portal or, bring in Cade Klubnik, whatever, he's ready. That's kind of going to put them back to the Clemson level, but maybe a little generous, but I'm still giving them a C-.
Fair enough. Make it?
Yeah, I actually had him at a better grade than that. I had him as a B, actually. I had him as a B, and my reasoning was I just think I've heard another NC State site mention this too, but I think they might be the most disrespected team in the country because they were undefeated at home. They still went 9-3, and everybody, they weren't ranked until like the last week of the season. And if NC State or Boston College or let me actually say, if NC State or Florida State in their prime had been 9-3, but they were not ranked until like the last week of this season, and it's only because people's perception of Clemson is they're down, which they are, but they're still 9-3. So to me, I just feel like they didn't meet expectations, but they finished 9-3, and you're disappointed because you thought they could go and compete and win maybe another spot in the playoffs. I think it's a B.
Yeah. I have them at a C+. I mean, obviously, like you said, it was championship expectations, but overall, I mean, they had one of the best defenses in the country. Their only losses are to Georgia, the closest game Georgia played all season before the SEC championship game, and then Pitt, the ACC champion, and us, a top 20 team. So, by no means a bad season, but obviously when you have those undefeated playoff hopes at the beginning of the year, it does sting a little bit. So I have them as a C+.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was kind of going between a C+ and a B-, just because, because part of me is kind of pushing for a higher grade, is saying, I mean, they did go 9-3. I mean, and also too, their 3 losses that they had were to the number 3 team in the country, the number 12 team in the country, and number 18 team in the country right now, being Georgia, Pitt. So, I mean, 3 solid losses, and obviously, all 3 of those were either on the road or a neutral site, like Macon was getting at. So, but then the bad thing is really, I mean, like DJ Uyunglele, I mean, is just
he's not what you thought he was.
It's super nerve wracking for Clemson, the fact that he literally did not throw over 250 passing yards in any game this season.
But did you see Will Shipley's tweet like yesterday, 2 days ago, where he said DJU for Heisman 2022? Write it down or something like that. I was like,
he's really hyping up. Crazy.
Yeah. He said what?
I can't wait to see what the future odds are going to be on DJ Uiagalelei winning Heisman next year.
Well, the thing, one brief thing about Clemson is that they also had injuries, so you kind of put that in too. The reason why they may have, and you're right, great point, Wayne. They lost their 3 losses were top 20 teams in the season.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I have maybe a little bit higher. That's what I was thinking.
Well, and also, too, I mean, just like offensive line was terrible. They really only had 1 stud wide receiver the entire season. And then they ended up relying on a true freshman running back. So it's like,
who was good and got injured.
Sure. But anyway, so now moving on to the next team, we're going to go Duke. And I think this is what Dan was getting at. Probably one of the teams that failed.
Nope, actually. I gave them a D-.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think, by the way, we everybody made their preseason predictions, and I think everybody had Duke going 3-9, 4-8, but everybody at least had them winning a conference game or 2. But at least they beat Northwestern and Kansas, right? So every ACC game was a 24+ point margin, except for Georgia Tech, which is only a 3-point, still a loss. It was kind of pathetic, but we're not looking at a premier football school. Pretty much anybody else, I'd probably give them an F, but I think just those two non-conference power conference wins gave them just a very slight 65.
Well, for me, I gave him an F. I gave him a total F. And my thing is, it's like when you roll into a test, like you're about a big test, and I'll say you didn't study for it, but you just walk in, you're like, okay, I know I'm going to fail. Probably. I'm just going to take my test and try to get it over with. And you're like, yeah, I did my best. You still failed. It's still really bad. Right. So to me, they were just not competitive. Except the best win is Northwestern. And
even I'd say Kansas.
Northwestern's had better years.
Look too bad.
So. You said what?
Yeah, I'd say I'd probably say Kansas was a better win. Honestly, Kansas didn't end the season too bad, but I also have them as an F. That was a good analogy. You go into the test knowing you're gonna fail, but you still fail. So
it's like, hey, you did get some wins there, hey, but it's still an F. You didn't even make it to a bowl season. You didn't even crack 500. I don't know. Did they have anybody on the first, second team All ACC? Maybe somebody.
Or Bobo, the receiver, was pretty good. Oh, the running back.
The whole point is, though, they just didn't have anything to point back to the season that was really successful.
They're a pretty good center, but I think he's in the portal now. So
not shocker. Now no Cutcliffe.
And then for me, obviously F, but mostly, honestly, because really that first game against UNC Charlotte, and because for a couple things. First of all, that was by far Charlotte's biggest win to date since their program started.
That's a great point. They lost to Charlotte
2014, and also too, with it being the first game, you had the whole offseason to prepare for this game.
That's a great point.
It's not like you play like North Carolina or Georgia Tech and then you had to play Charlotte, so you kind of didn't really have a chance to focus on them. You had all offseason to focus on them.
You got to wonder if they just rolled into it thinking we're going to win.
Well, but how terrible is that? Even you would hope any ACC team, even if you rolled into Charlotte and weren't 100% focused, you could still win the game. Now, you might make it a game, but you would hope that you would still be able to win the game. So even for Duke, again, just to find a way to give Charlotte a win like that,
let me ask this,
was bad. So.
Yeah, let me ask this question. Which is worse, potentially not prepping for Charlotte and losing, and really prepping for Charlotte and losing? Both are bad. Both. The point is, who cares whether they prepared or not? They lost to Charlotte.
Right. Well, and they got blown out by everybody else. It was just like you said, it wasn't even close.
And they got shut out at UVA. That's pretty hard to do.
That's pretty tough.
That actually is a good point too.
Before we continue, I want to take a quick second to tell you about our sponsor, Flatlands Jessup Insurance Group, that has your whole world covered, with agents in 5 offices throughout Eastern North Carolina to help you decide how much coverage you need. Offering policies for home and auto, recreational vehicles, commercial, crop, health, life, and employee benefits. They are able to combine options to find a comprehensive solution that works for you. Flatlands Jessup protects the things you love so you can spend less time worrying and more time enjoying them. Find them on Facebook and Instagram at Flatlands Jessup. You can also visit their webpage at www.flatlandsjessup.com. So please make sure to go and check them out. All right, so now heading on to Florida State. So again, was predicted to go 6-6, end up 5-7. So not too far off from what the experts predicted. But Dan, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I got C-. It could have been worse. Nobody expected them to get more than 7 to 8 wins. I think I had them 7-5, like 4-4 in conference. But I think honestly, long term, I actually like Jordan Travis. I think he made a lot of developments throughout the season. He looked very raw at first, kind of just explosive, but a lot of mistakes, not the ability to work through progressions and work through an offense. And he looks so much more polished throughout the season. So that's a plus for them. But overall, things are kind of a mess there with the whole Hunter situation,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But C- I think is a fair grade for them, just because the expectations of your program is pretty much higher, but they didn't go into the season thinking they were going to win 8-9 games.
Yeah, right. Macon?
I had him as a D+. So C-, D+, same thing. To me, the losses to Jacksonville State was terrible. But then they were, but they did have some good. They lost to Notre Dame by 3 points in overtime, so they were pretty competitive. They were competitive for the most part against Clemson. I mean, it was like the last minute or so in the game when they lost, if I remember correctly, and I mean, they beat Miami, and I gave Miami a better grade than them. I just think there was not. I think the start they had going 0-4, being an historic sucky season for them. When it's Mike Norvell's fourth year, I just to me, I don't call that. To me, a C is average, and I wouldn't say that's average. It was definitely below average.
Yeah, I agree. Michael?
Yeah, I had him as C plus. Actually, I mean, I think that, like you said, they played Notre Dame tough that first game of the season, almost won there. With Jordan Travis, they were pretty good. He was out for a couple games. He missed a game or two here and there against us. He didn't play. Like Dan said, I don't think anybody was expecting much more than maybe 7 wins. And I think I think it's slow. It is a mess, but I think it's slowly starting to get better.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Now, the one thing which I will say with Florida State is I know going into the season there was a ton of hype behind Mackenzie Milton. A ton of hype.
Oh yeah, spring game he was especially exciting.
Oh yeah, everybody was rolling over backwards for him.
I bought into it.
Sure.
I bought in.
I mean, yeah. I mean, he was a borderline Heisman Trophy finalist at one point. During his time at UCF for his major injury. So, but yeah, I mean, for me, I'm giving him a solid C. And it's because there's the bad things. Obviously, yeah, the loss to Jacksonville State's a terrible loss for sure. Obviously the wins overall weren't too great. Probably your best win was over probably Miami, honestly. And because that's one thing I give him a good grade for is, to beat Miami at home, that's huge for Norvell. You got to do good against your rivals, and so obviously to beat Miami, but losing to Florida, you can kind of forgive a little bit more because it was only by 3 points. It was at Florida. So again, just solid season. Okay. I think FSU has bigger fish to fry right now with their recruiting burns really more than their season burns, so, but yeah, I mean, just solid season, but we'll be interested to see what happens with them next season. So I think I have to stop at for part 1 here at Georgia Tech, and then we'll kind of roll in. So Georgia Tech, Dan, obviously predicted to go 5-7, ended up being 2-6 sorry. I messed up the 3-9. Yeah, there we go. I got them flip flopped. 3-9 overall and 2-6 in conference. So
this was a team I actually had failing. I think I'm just completely out on Jeff Collins. It's simple. The hype was there. The recruiting was there as first class.
Only hype.
But the recruiting has gone downhill because what are the recruits realizing? They're selling a product that's not really the product that they're selling. Like, it's just not winning games. And I haven't seen development from their players. Jeff Sims, who came in with a lot of hype, hasn't really done anything. He didn't start the vast majority of the later portion of the season. And Jahmyr Gibbs in the transfer portal, among several others. Like, I'm just out on that program, to be honest. I think they need to look elsewhere.
Yep.
Totally agree. I didn't give him an F. I gave him a D because I never thought they were that great in the first place. It's like I knew Duke was worse. But you got to look in the Coastal Division preseason, every team got at least 1 vote for first place. Every team except Duke. That's why it's even. Yeah. But Georgia Tech, I think, had 4, if I'm not mistaken. And 4 people thought Georgia Tech would win the Coastal Division, which one is a statement of how fluid the Coastal is. But to me, the whole Georgia Tech thing, I was just sitting here thinking about it. It's kind of like where we are with the country right now with all this inflation. It's a bunch of hype. And it's like, oh, we're doing so great. Look at us. Don't look over here. And then it's like, yeah, but you're puffing yourself up over here, and it's like there's crap right now. So it's like, yeah, I didn't really see much in Jeff Collins except the rah kind of guy, and
Yeah.
We're going to go and kick everybody's butt and take names, and you're the one who's getting your butt kicked, and you're the one who's not doing anything with your players, really. I mean, we all, as NC State fans, we all know Jemias Griffin was a 4-star running back recruit that had committed to State and flipped to Georgia Tech. Well, now we all kind of laugh. It's like, sorry, man. It's
well, he's in transfer,
and now
portal,
he's transferred.
Right?
So as he should, because I just think was this year 3 or 4 for Jeff Collins?
3.
3.
Yeah.
3.
So he's going in year 4. He fired a few coordinators, I think. I think he fired. So you have to at this point just at least give fans something to hold on to, but it ain't looking good.
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
Michael?
I have him as a F too. I mean, Jeff Collins just hasn't lived up to the hype. I mean, it's tough. It's obviously going to be a tough transition from the triple option to a spread offense, but they haven't even shown like an ounce of improvement for that, really. I mean, like we've mentioned, Gibbs transfer portal, Yates transfer portal, and it just doesn't look good.
I mean, I will say they did have the good. Then it looked nice at the times to a degree against UNC, and that was a big win for them. But that was about it.
UNC is kind of a very. Oh, I'll get to that.
Yeah, we have a whole section we could talk about UNC. and I will say Georgia Tech was very close to beating Miami again. They were
didn't.
Well, yeah, and so for me, I actually originally wrote down here that I had it as D+, but Dan from the get-go convinced me to move it down to a D-. So especially because looking at it, I mean, they ended the season on a 6-game losing streak, and also too, the last 2 games they lost 100-0 combined in the last 2 games, 100-0.
Wow.
So it's like, okay, like you have negative like momentum heading into the offseason, like. You don't have good momentum. You don't have bad momentum. You have negative momentum. You have less than 0 momentum. So
their stadium against Georgia was completely red.
Yeah. Well, do you? I mean, are you surprised?
No.
I mean, but it's still. But the only looking at the schedule, the only thing that's still I just cannot stop scratching my head about is a win over North Carolina 45-22. It just makes no sense whatsoever. So
North Carolina expected it to be Jordan Yates, and then they just all of a sudden trotted out Jeff Sims, and North Carolina players had no idea that there was a running quarterback on the team, and he ran all over them.
I'm looking here at the rankings, who they fired. They fired their OC. They fired one of their co-defensive coordinators / safeties coaches, and they fired their cornerbacks coach. So I guess their secondary was garbage.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So with that being said, so we're actually going to change this into a 3-parter. Is again, obviously, conversations went a little bit longer, but that's okay. Hey, it just means more content to check out, right? So and also too more time to have Dan and AC Content around with us. So we're excited about it. So thank you all so much again for tuning in. Again, please make sure if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's free to do and really helps support us. And also to make sure that you don't miss out on any of our new content. But also too, if you haven't checked out all of our NC State content, make sure to go do so. Like our interview that we just had with Debbie Yao. So go check that out and give this video a like as well, and give us a follow at Tuffy Talk Now on Twitter or Instagram. And also to Dan, I want to give a tag real quick for ACC Content.
Yeah, just Dan Siegel at ACC Content at AC. So it's how do I explain this? Like it's 2 C's and then on 10 and then underscore.
You're kind of merging the end of ACC and content
into content.
Got it. Probably makes a little more sense.
Yeah, no. So thank you all so much again for tuning in. And hey, as always, go Pack, y'all.